Okay, so we are taking a little bit of a break from the Mishnah we're on, and the blame could either be placed on Fega or on my mom. Um, the blame being placed on my mom is because this year that we're going to focus on, the topic is turning 40, according to Pirkei Avos. And my mom gave birth to me on January 10th, and my birthday is next week, and that's why this was on my radar. And I was on the fence about whether to do this next week or this week, and then Fega emailed me and said, if there's no preference, then she said she preferred to delay the Pirkei Avos to next week because she can't be here this week. So I was thinking about both those things. I was like, okay, fine, we'll delay the Pirkei Avos till next week. So this is a bit of a strange Mishnah, as you'll see, but it's also going to be a little strange to approach it the way we do tonight, because the Mishnah is basically I don't know what the word is, whether milestone is a bad way to describe it, but it's like age related, if there's a more neutral word than milestone, milestones are like taking a stance on it. It's about age related milestones, and there are a lot of them, and we're only going to really focus on primarily on one, but I want to focus also on the one before it and the one after it. So what we're going to do is we're going to read and translate the whole Mishnah, and then we're going to ask questions on focusing on the age of 40, but kind of asking other questions on general questions on the Mishnah that like might shed light on this question. Okay. And we will get one idea about the whole Mishnah, but we're not going to go into the details, as we'll see. Okay, yeah, let's start by translating here. Okay, so Hu Haya Omer. So I think this is you. Actually, I meant to check this beforehand. This is most likely Yehuda ben Tema. So Yehuda ben Tema says, Ben Chamesh Shanim Lamikra. So I'm gonna go ahead. The lamed here is a little ambiguous, so I'm just gonna translate it like in the most minimalist way possible. A 5-year-old for scripture, okay, for Torah B'Ksav. Ben Eser LaMishnah, a 10-year-old for Mishnah. Ben Shalosh Esrei LaMitzvos, a 13-year-old for mitzvos. Ben Chamesh Esrei LaTalmud, a 15-year-old for Talmud. Ben Shmona Esrei LaChuppah, an 18-year-old for chuppah literally means marriage canopy, but I think everyone says that this means marriage here. So for chuppah, Ben Esrim Lirdov. How do you translate that?
For pursuing?
Yeah, for pursuing. Okay, strange. Okay. Ben Shaloshim Lakoach, a 30-year-old for, how do you translate for koach?
Strength?
Yeah, strength is good. I like strength. Okay, for strength. Okay. So then here's ours. Ben Arbaim Labina, a 40-year-old for understanding. Ben Chamishim La'itza, a 50-year-old for counsel, okay, or advice. Okay, this is a difficult one to translate, okay? A 60-year-old for, now how would you translate zikna? And then if anyone could point out why this is difficult to translate, then that'd be good. So if you had to translate zikna, how do you translate it, Tamar?
Like old age, maybe?
Yeah. So zikna is old age. And then what else can it mean? And then that's going to really be the difficulty here. Like when you talk about a zaken in Torah. Yeah.
Is it like a chacham?
Yeah. So old age plus wisdom. Okay. So it's like I don't really know a good English word that equally means old age and wisdom. Like we have the word of like an elder, that in certain contexts you can tell it means like someone who has wisdom, but I don't know a single word that has both of those. So if you could think of a word, then that'd be great, but we'll just say zikna for now. Okay, a 70-year-old for seva. Okay, anyone know what seva is? Mipnei seva tagum tomorrow.
I think this is also like an old age word, right?
It is. It actually is more specific than old age, or more, not more. Yeah, it is more specific.
It's like white hair or something.
Yes, white hair. Yeah. Okay, for white hair. Literally white hair. There is an archaic word that no one really uses anymore that I think means, let's see, hoariness. HOAR, great age, especially gray or white with age. Yeah, I think that's the thing. Yeah, tomorrow.
I'm pretty sure the article uses this in when Ya'akov says this.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, that's yeah. I actually learned it from Magic the Gathering. But I now that you mention it, then I do recall that. Okay, Ben, where are we at? Ben Shmonim La Gvura, an 80-year-old, for now. This connects back to our mishnah Gvura, which ordinarily you might translate as strength, but since we use that array, we'll say might. Okay, Ben Tishim La Shuach, a 90-year-old. Anyone know what lashuach is? So most people say lashuach is for stooping. Okay, I think it's from the same word as like hishtachaveh, like to bow down, but it's not bowing down voluntarily. It's like being hunched over. Some want to say you're supposed to read as lasuach, which means to converse or to pray, which we had a shiur on that earlier this year. But plain shah is lashuach, and then here comes the one that's not so nice to think about. Ben mea, 100-year-old, ki'ilu meis va'avar ubato min olam. It's as if he's dead and passed and nullified from the world. Okay. And despite all Jewish people wishing each other Ad Me'av Esrim, it doesn't even go that far. You're already dead if you're 100. Okay. So yeah. What they should really ask for is Ad Me'av Esrim in good health. Because if you follow this, then that's not really something to look forward to. Okay. So the game plan again is to focus on. I want to focus on these three. And the reason why I want to focus on these three, again, this is a totally selfish shiur here, but look, hopefully, some of you are already in this age range. Hopefully, the rest of you will be there. I feel like, so the reason why I want to focus on this is because I am going to be 40, but then I'm, emerging from 30, and then in the 40 age range, I don't exactly know how that overlaps with the 50. So I think having the next thing on the horizon would also be good. Okay, so what are the questions on either those three specific clauses or on the entire thing? Or if you don't want to even say questions or problems, just observations, and we can convert them into questions and problems on the whole thing. And I think you'll agree with me, this is a very weird mishnah compared to what we've been doing. Does not read like a typical one. Yeah, Vanessa.
I guess what's the point of it as a really vague question? Like,
yeah,
you could say like, oh, it's a teaching order, but then it gets to marriage and it's like, okay, is this milestones you're supposed to reach? But then it just says you stoop at 90, and I don't think that's a milestone. Like, it just seems
exactly
like
right.
It doesn't have a cohesive message.
Okay, yeah. So I think what I want to do, I was also struggling to figure out how to frame the kind of question that is bothering you. So I don't mind framing it in different ways, even if it's going to be overlap. So one is, what is the practical teaching, right? So if, what is the practical, what is this teaching us on a practical level? Okay. And I'm gonna save the second part of your question for another formulation. Yeah, tomorrow.
I guess is this prescriptive or descriptive?
Okay, good. That was exactly how I was gonna say what Vanessa was saying. So are these prescriptive, okay, i.e. what you should do or aim for, or descriptive, okay, what I guess naturally happens at these ages, okay, or a mixture, okay, what was I at each age, and if the latter, so I guess seeming, okay, I guess if the latter, then what is the unified, I guess, I mean, this gets into what Vanessa was asking. What is the unified, thrust, or lesson, takeaway from the whole thing. Yeah. Tamar.
Yeah, I think this is more of the same question like Vanessa's question, but what is like the category of these descriptors?
Okay. Right. So what kinds of descriptors are these, right? So some are, so I mean, I think they seem to lend themselves to some categories here. So I guess let's just quickly yeah, okay, we'll categorize. Let's categorize them now because we're not gonna really analyze them. So what would you say the categories are? You could just say.
I mean, there's like teaching related stuff, like Vanessa
Right.
pointed out.
Okay, so you've got the first, so you've got 5, 10. It's hard to tell 13 whether that's teaching related because that almost would seem to be like legal. Like that's just something that happens, you know, like you become obligated in mitzvos. Oh, that was the other thing I was gonna say, by the way. Sorry, just disclaimer here. So I was wondering, you know, this is a women's Pirkei Avos here, right? And these are, you know, some of these are, well, this one definitely is stated in terms of a male perspective. Okay. So I was wondering to myself, like, and some of the other ones might be as well. But the question is, like, is this better, you know, to teach like in women's shiur or like you know, in other words, like maybe there are going to be more universal insights if you're looking at this not exclusively through the male perspective. And then the question is going to be also, actually, I'll list this as a question here. To what extent are these gender specific? Yeah, I don't know if we're going to get into so much of that tonight, but in some of these other ones. Okay, then we've got, yeah, so educational is one of them. What are some other categories?
I guess like midos. I don't know how to put the 30, 40, 50, but like those aren't age related.
Yeah.
Like I think 60 plus is age related. Like it's literally just physical, like you're old, you're older, you're white haired, you're stooping. Like I don't know what
Right.
word to use
So
for that.
I think intellectual midos, or sorry, I don't know about shloshim, but definitely 40
Traits.
and
Like maybe just take it out of the Hebrew. Like they're descriptive. Like
yeah. So
like they don't seem to have any implicit directive. Like even pursuing, even though that's vague, that's still a direct like.
Okay,
that seems to
right.
imply some sort of action. You know what I mean? But like
Yeah.
strength and bina and counsel, none of those have. Well, counsel, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm fine putting that all into one. So midos. Okay. And then yeah, directive. You use the word directive, right? Ben shmonim. So 18 for chuppah, and 20 for pursuing seem to be directive, like what you should be doing at this time. And then I guess these last ones sound like just physical, you know. And maybe ben shloshim lekoach as well. Yeah. Oh, did I not have any? Yeah. So now I have another color available. So I guess we will do. This was yellow. Yeah. Fine. Right. Okay. So the question is, what kinds of descriptors are these? It seems like a mixture of different like characteristics, kinds of characteristics. Yeah, Vanessa.
This is a short one. This is actually part of number 2, I think.
Yeah.
If these are prescriptive, what happens if you don't use them? To what extent? Like, what's the?
Okay, I'm gonna actually make a separate question, even though it is based on number 2. If these are prescriptive, so then I guess the question is, why should they be done at these ages, and what is the consequence of not doing them? Yeah, good. Yeah, Ella?
So more like specifics on the like specific terms or whatever, but 80 jumped out to me. Like Gvura at 80, that seems, I feel like it doesn't fit with the others. Or what exactly does that mean? Maybe I'm just not understanding.
Yeah, so I'll tell you, just not as a way of dismissing the question, but just to show where it's coming from, is that is from a pasuk in Tehillim that we say on Shabbos. Tehillim 90, Tefillah Moshe. Yemei shenosenu v'hem shivim shana v'im bigvuros shmonim shana. The days of our years among them are 70 years, and if with might, 80 years. Yeah. So it's a good question whether the Mishnah is referencing that, or like that is referencing the phenomenon in the Mishnah. It seems to be, I mean, we have to explain the idea anyway, but it seems to be that like my intuition is if the pasuk didn't use that term, like my assumption is that it's a reference to the pasuk because the pasuk came before this. But yeah, Vanessa. Oh, that's from
I
before.
actually forgot to put
sure.
my hand down.
Alex.
I mean, I don't know if my question is taking this too literally, but with 70 being for Seva, don't like white hairs come earlier, or do they mean like a full head of white hair? And like, what does that practically mean?
Right. Yeah, that's a good question. Right. I guess that is I'm gonna make that as a, yeah, you know what? I think I'm gonna make these as sub questions within two.
Especially because like within the older age like categories, like they all have like tangible things to them where like, yeah, that makes sense, but like it seems like they just threw it in to have something for 70.
Right. So if these are descriptive, so then like what do we make of like instances where this doesn't happen at this age? So let's say, for example, if people have hair that is prematurely white, right? Oh, sorry, what? Prematurely white. Yeah, right. So like what are the implications of that? Yeah. Lauren?
My questions were specifically about 40 and 30, I guess.
Yeah.
So what does like koach mean for when you're 30?
Okay, right.
And I guess what's the relationship? Is there a relationship between what happens when you're 30 and you're 40? Like, why are you only able to achieve bina after koach?
Okay.
Maybe
Well,
maybe it's a question on the whole Mishnah. Like, is there any relationship between
yeah.
each
Okay,
stage?
I actually want to make that as a question on the whole Mishnah, which is and I also don't know how to ask this one. I guess to what extent? No, not to what extent. What happens in between the stages, right? So the question is like, is it a continuum from one to the next? Is like, you know, are you supposed to be like working on the next stage when you're at this one, or is this the stage where you work on this characteristic? I hope that makes sense to people. Like, in other words, is Bina attained at 40, or like do you start working on it at 40, you know? Or like, and then does the Bina come, and I guess either way, like has the Bina been building this whole time? Does it only build from 30? You know, does it continue building after 30 or after 40? I mean, you know, I guess like, is there like which of these overlaps with the next? Yeah. Okay. And then I'll ask this question. What is meant by Bina here? And then why is this only, I guess okay, I'll ask for both of them. Why is koach the characteristic of 30? And then why is Bina the characteristic of 40? Yeah, Vanessa?
I have a short one, what I think is a short one, and a long one. The short one is just on 40 also. There's some idea in some circles that you can only start learning Kabbalah when you're 40. So like, why is that tied into this at all? I don't know if that's even like a question we want to ask, but like,
yeah, no, it's a good question. I think I don't want to add it to this simply because I don't want to like go into that area.
Yeah,
right? Yeah,
totally fine.
Yeah.
Then this is the one I'm more worried about. Someone asked about the white hair, and I think this is more of an observation because I don't really understand how to frame what I'm noticing, but like other things here also don't really seem. I think the general question is, does this apply to the individual, or is this a descriptor or prescriptor for the people at large as an objective goal? Because like clearly people are not only getting married at 18.
Right.
Or so like from 18 onward. Like people used to get married below 18 even. Like even forget about like you know, in the old country.
Yeah. So I'm just
Cool.
listening to this. Either way, what about outliers? What about societal changes? You know, what
I
about?
think the question also is just, is this meant for the individual specifically, or is this more like a I don't know how
Yeah,
to
so
put my question.
let's say this also. Okay, who is the audience, right?
Yeah.
And here, like you know, should each person regard each of these stages as being applied to them automatically? Yeah. Okay, good. Alex.
My question is kind of a sub question of this, which is if you hit one of these milestones early, is there a consequence to that? Like,
Right. Good. So what is the consequence of not doing them on time or doing them early? Yeah. Yeah, like some of them would seem to be good if you could do it early. And some of them, and let's say you do it early, like let's say like you you get Bina early, like you know, is that like you know, is that, should it be suspect, you know? Yeah.
also, is there like a merit to these things being chronological? Like, what if you get Bina before you're married? Like,
Okay, right. So
Or if you start working before you get married.
yeah, what if they're out of order? Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah, tomorrow.
I just an observation and a question. One was that you were asking about the timeline, like how does the trait relate to the age? Like, is this supposed to be before or after? You know,
Yeah.
and I think maybe you could try and figure it out from the early ones. I don't. It's not really. That's just an observation. That maybe
Okay.
when you know,
Yeah.
maybe if you think that a kid can't start mikra until they're 5, then that would tell you something. If it's
Right.
even consistent, which I feel like can't.
Yeah, I feel like that's the problem here, right? Is that like if it does not seem, it seems to be really hard to come up with a unified theory for all of these that says that they're all being stated in the same way, with the same like government subject to the same rules, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I also have a question, which is I guess how specific is the words bina and etza and the other intellectual words? It's not all the normal words that we use for intellectual progression. It seems like it's really specific ones. There's no chachma, there's no das, I guess in particular.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good question also. So for the intellectual virtues, why these? Okay, what happened to chachma or das? Right. Or seichel. Yeah. Right. It's not like yeah, I feel like yeah, I feel like the people who like are always looking for like the patterns of stuff and things are going to be very like disturbed by this. Yeah, Vanessa?
I don't know if this is like a good question, and the answer might just be the nature of child development, but why does it go from like a 5-year gap and a 3-year gap? Like, how are they spaced out? Why is it that after 20 it goes
Yeah.
up by decades, but before that it's so?
Okay, that's
and
a good
again,
question
like in
also.
adolescence, that might just be human development, and you reach
Yeah.
adulthood by 25. But
Okay, sure. So why let's say here, why are the intervals shorter in youth and then switch to decades? Okay, so before we go to some of the mafarshim, so I'll just say the game plan for tonight. So I have an idea from the Sforno on all of them. And then I have the Meiri and Rabbeinu Bachia, who are very similar, that I want to look at on 30, 40, 50. And we'll see what we get out of that. And we can get some things, but I feel like there's a big problem that I've not been able to solve. So that's what's on the menu. But before we do that, anyone have any ideas on either like just question one, like what exactly is I guess 1 or 2, what's the takeaway, or what are we supposed to get out of this? Yeah, let's start with that. Yeah, Tamar?
I mean, this is more of like a flavor than an actual idea, but I do
Sure.
think that in my not quite 30 years, I guess, I do think that there are certain things that certain developments that you can't have until you had certain life experiences, which could be intellectual, but I think that there is like a phenomenon like that.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, maybe when you graduate from high school and then have to work in a job or something. Like you just get different things, get different kinds of maturity, or I'm just making something up, but like I think there are progressions in life that cause you to be able to access different kinds of traits and ideas.
Right. That actually leads to a question. Hold on just a second. Similar to your last question, or this question, I think, which is why only these, right? Like, couldn't there be more? Like, it doesn't mention, I mean, maybe you can say that this is there, but like, you know, it doesn't mention like first job or like having kids or, you know, like, I don't know, like, you know, other things, right? Yeah. So like, you know, yeah. And again, that's the kind of question I don't like, in the sense of I can't answer why not something else, but if we have that question in the back of our mind, maybe it'll help us to like focus on what's unique here. Yeah, but I agree with what you're saying, is that it definitely seems to be that like there are certain things you can't get until you've gone through certain life experiences. I just don't know which of them, how many that applies to.
Yeah, I would say also I think just getting older is part of it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. One thing we can definitely say is that aging is part of the theme of this mishnah. Yeah, Vanessa.
I think I usually read this and I take it somewhat prescriptively and just like move on quickly because it's hard, but someone mentioned being descriptive, and I wonder if the point of this mishnah is for us to like zoom out and realize like, oh, like we have certain things to look forward to, and also like kind of a like we turn into worms kind of thing. Like all the end stage
Yeah.
stuff is like you would think like, I think reading this you're like, oh, scripture, mishnah, like mitzvah, like Talmud, like you do all these things, you're going up and up, you'd expect it to keep going up and up, but it actually seems to decline in a sense. So I
Yeah.
think I wonder if some of this is like just trying to give us perspective and be like, hey, your days are numbered and you have certain things you have to achieve in them, and like these are like points where you can achieve them, and the sooner the better. Like,
Okay.
also like realistically, I don't know
Yeah.
how. I'm Baal Teshuva. I don't know what normal ages are, but I can't imagine mastering scripture by the age of 5. I can't imagine doing it by the age of 50. That sounds
Yeah,
hard.
right.
So like,
Yeah.
I want,
Okay.
I can't imagine that like truly, literally prescriptively.
Right.
Like
Right.
reading it just about it being like, you are expected to do this, and if you don't, okay, but like work on it. Like,
Right.
I think this is more being like, this is what you have time to achieve and what you have to look forward to.
Okay. So first of all, you basically said exactly what the Sforno says. Okay, which is great.
Love the Sforno.
Yeah. So we're gonna read that in a second. But you also reminded me that I forgot to state 2 facts. One of them, and this is not on the part that we're gonna focus on, but with these ages for the education part, it's when you start doing the thing, but it's not clear about the other stuff. So in other words, with 5, it's not that you've mastered it by 5, it's that you're starting to learn at 5, and then you start learning Mishnah at 10, and you start doing mitzvahs at 13, and then you start doing Talmud at 15. And then the other thing I wanted to mention that the Mefarshim also talk about is for some reason this always confuses me. I always have to like count it out. This is talking about when you have completed this number of years, not when you're starting this number of years. So I always have to like, you know, I always like do a double take when I look at my weeks of my life chart. So I'm turning 40, but what that means is that like on January 10th, that would be the completion of 40 years of life, because you don't start off at age 1, you start at age 0. So the proof of that is talking about this is 13, because 13 is you become bar mitzvah after you've completed 13 years, you know, when you're 1 day into your 14th year. So yeah, okay. So let's
thank you for clarifying the first part, because the first time I learned Pirkei Avos, someone told me the exact opposite and was like, you have to have it mastered by 5. And they were also about to show, I don't know where they got it from, so that's comforting.
Yeah. I also just want to make a couple comments before we go into the Sforno, is even in Chazal themselves, then they're not rigid about these first milestones. Like the Rambam says, and let's just look at the halacha. Hold on. Yeah, so the Rambam, where can I find the Rambam? I think it's in Hilchos Talmud Torah. Makes sense. I think it's 2. Yeah. So he says like this. He says, now, okay, this is not exactly like a ironclad disproof. He says, Machnisin es hatinokos lehislamid keben sheish keben shava. Lefi koach haben ubinyan gufo. So we bring the kids into school at the age of 6 or 7, based on the koach of the son and his bodily constitution. Koach might mean energy here, like how much energy he has, or stamina maybe. And binyan gufa sounds like physical constitution. Upachos mi ben sheish ein machnisin oso. We don't start him in school before 6. Okay, before the age of 6. Now, even so, first of all, you could say, well, this already goes against the Mishnah, because the Mishnah says 5. And when the Ram talks about teaching kids, he seems to be talking about how they primarily learn Torah B'Ksav, But then you could say also, well, no, the father starts teaching them before this, so maybe the father started teaching him. But either way, like you see that when it comes to school, the Rambam says 6 or 7, it depends on how the kid is, but not before 6. So my point is that these are not rigid things. Or let's say, for example, in so the age of 18 is l'chuppah. Okay, anyone know what else Chazal say? There's another age-related statement. Maybe there's more, but they do talk about the ideal age to get married in the Gemara, at least. Anyone know? Yeah, Vanessa.
20 or 21, I think.
Okay, so there is a statement to that effect of like 20 being like the normal age to get married. The statement I was thinking of is and I meant to look this up ahead of time. Actually, you know what? Hold on a second. Statement in the Talmud about getting married at 13 and spitting in the eye of the Satan. Let's just see if they find it. Ruchista. Okay, fine. Well, I don't know what's the source of Rav Chista's statement. Okay, it doesn't say the daf. Okay, but assuming this is correct, I don't know if this is correct, but this is the thing I was thinking of, is he says I didn't remember it as about the daughter. No, see, I remember a different story. Okay, so I don't know if I could trust ChatGPT here, but someone says like I think he got married at like 15, and he says if only I had gotten married at 13, I would have spit at the Satan in the eye, and that seems to indicate like that there's some better things. So my point is not to go into the details. My point is to say that like it did seem to be that these are not exact ages, at least for the first part. So we can assume probably it's not exact ages for the latter part. Yeah, Ayala?
In general, because this is in Pirkei Avos, do we assume it's like directed at the chassid or not, or like to what extent
so
is it, isn't it?
This I would say definitely sounds like it's for everybody. Like I think it'd be very hard read to say it's for the chassid, so exclusively for the chassid. Okay, and that's from just the way it reads, and also all the mefarshim I think seem to indicate that. Okay, so let's read the Sforno, who says it almost exactly like Vanessa said it, and I'm going to read. I put the English here, but I'm going to read it in Hebrew because I like the Hebrew. Amar, he said, She'im zeh shechai ha'adam ketzarim bichlal, that not only is man's life extremely brief, hine milvad zeh, in addition to that, roy lihisbonen, you should contemplate the fact sheha'itim hara'uyim lihishtadlus besocham, that the periods of time in which you should strive for certain things, heim ketzarim me'od, are very short. Me'achrim lavo u'makdimin lates. They come late and they leave quickly. Lefikach, and therefore tzarech she'imahir ha'adam, therefore a person should be quick or should make haste. Ki amnam lo yihi roy letalmud ad chamesh esrei shana. Because you see, you're not ready for Talmud until you're 15. V'leichonin el nachon ad arbaim shana, and you don't have a you're not firmly established. Presumably that means in your understanding until you're 40. The achar hachamishim tiye yeridas hakokos muvoris, and then after 50, it's all downhill. Okay, all of the dwindling of the faculties is apparent. Ka'amra, as it says, when we ben chamishim shana yashuv mitzvah avodah. It says about the Levim who were working in the Mikdash or the Mishkan from the age of 50, then they should retire from the Legion of Avoda, and that's presumably because their physical strength goes down. Uvazeh heir ozen al hacharitus lahasi chaye olam be'od hakokos hamasharsos patakvam. He is pointing out, the Tana is pointing out that you should have diligence or alacrity in attaining eternal life while your faculties that are serving you are still in their strength. Kamosha Heir Shlomo Ba'amro, as Shlomo says, remember your creator in the days of your youth before the days of bad come, which means like the physical deterioration. Yeah, so exactly like Vanessa said, life is short, but not only is life short, okay, as if that's not distressing enough, the time periods where you can work on stuff are very short, and therefore don't waste those time periods. There are windows of opportunity that open and close. And some of them seem to be in terms of your physical development. Some of them seem to be in terms of like how much time you have to devote to things. Like, for example, presumably when it says 15 is for Talmud and 18 is for marriage, like if that was done back then it seems like you have those 3 years to learn Talmud. And like after that, your ability to learn Talmud is going to be severely compromised because you're going to have to start providing for a family and everything like that, So like, don't waste these windows of time. Yeah, Tamar?
This is just an observation, but I think this is really interesting in that I think it's really a departure from like general remembering your mortality. And I think it's both, it's like more urgent, but it's also more practical.
Right.
I just think it's really, I don't really
That's
have
a great point.
question.
That's a great point. Right. It definitely it draws upon all the feelings of remembering your mortality, but there's often a question that people have when they practice, memento mori of like, okay, so what am I supposed to do? And you end up just doing something frantic or like the bad approach is like YOLOing it and like just going into like taiva. But this is like providing like a roadmap, And I think what this does also is it's like I think this lends, even though Sforno doesn't say, this lends itself to not taking these as rigid. It's just giving you a general idea of like look, in Chazal's time, maybe that's what they did, but for us, it's like, you have, up through 18, you're in high school, and then through like your 20s, you're in college, and then, so it's like, for us, we could just tweak it and apply it to our things. Also for us, like, I don't think, I mean, 9-year-olds still stoop, but like, as they always say, like, 50 is the new 40 and like 60 is the, like, I think we're in a society where like, generally speaking, people live longer and health is better, even though we got our own health problems. And so like you can adjust it and tweak it for your society. Yeah, Vanessa?
Yeah, I mean, I really like this. Obviously, I said something, but like, I think the way this Sforno formulates it, it's not just descriptive. It's not just giving a contour of what the lifespan looks like. It's being prescriptive and being like, listen, around 15 is when you should start thinking about like studying Talmud and getting really serious about Torah learning.
Yeah.
Regardless of where you're like, it's not about necessarily Talmud. I think he's generally just saying like, these are the different stages in life based on like what we understand of human development and how people work.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you're like 45 and you're not married, it's not because like you didn't follow this mishnah. It's that like at 18 is when you start getting serious and you start thinking about marriage, or whether you can't control when that happens. And I think with every stage, according to Sforno, that's like what happens. Like I'm turning 25 soon, and that's a really fun midlife crisis. And I think Sforno's like, hey, like this is a time where you're supposed to start getting like those pieces together, like supposed to start pursuing a livelihood really seriously. And like it's like really poignant for me because I'm doing nursing applications by the end of the month, and that's also my birthday. It's not fun, but like.
Yeah, no, I think it is healthy to have that kind of roadmap. And as long as you don't take it, like you're saying, as long as you don't take it as like you mean I should ignore all my specific circumstances? Like I think that's when it can get unhealthy. And like, look, people are going to just naturally be looking towards the people around them to like figure out when they should be doing stuff. And I think better to have like guidance from, I don't know, from Chazal than just like what people are doing. Like for example, like I think I could talk about this trend without like, hopefully without offending anybody. I think it is fairly common in the secular America world, at least, for people to push off marriage way later than in like the frum world, and like, where does that come from? It comes from a different set of values. Now, I'm not saying whether those values are good or bad. I'm saying that if you are a 20-something person and you're looking around the world in America and seeing when people get married, you're going to be tempted to follow a certain pattern. And that may or may not go against Jewish values. So you should look at the Jewish values and like at least have a roadmap to be able to like assess, what you're doing, even if it doesn't, align with your particular circumstances. Yeah, Tamar.
Oh, this is on the Sforno. Are you able to scroll back
Yeah.
quickly? Do you think that he's making a hard line between the pre and post 50, or is he just kind of talking about all at once?
I think he is making a hard line from post 50. And I think we're going to see support for that in the Mefarshim. But he's talking physically, I think. That physically your body starts to wear down.
Yeah, I guess my question is is he saying that up until 50 you have time periods to be involved in certain endeavors, and then after 50 you don't have that ability anymore?
Oh, I think he's just using this as an example, and like pointing to the fact. Yeah, actually, what's funny? It is weird. He puts in like the emphasis on learning for the 15 to 40, and he says his faculties will dwindle. I assume he is talking about physical faculties because he quotes the Levian.
I mean, you could also, if your brain is deteriorating physically, that will affect your mental capacity also.
It will, but I don't think your brain starts deteriorating at 50, especially because it says 60 you have advice. Wait, no, sorry, 60 you have Zikna, right, which is a type of chachma, yeah. But Tamara, am I missing your question?
I guess my question is Sforno is he making a statement about your life until 50 and another statement about your life after 50, or is that just part of how he's reading the whole mishnah and
I think he's just using it as an example. I mean, he does seem to hold that there is a dividing line from 50 and on, but he also holds there's a dividing line from 4 until 40.
Yeah, okay, but it's not like the main point here. The point
that's not the main point. Yeah, I think he's just using the example. Yeah. I want to give another example from 20. Okay. So just so you know, those who are closer to 20. The 20, I did not include this here, but I'll show you on the Mikros Gedolos. So there's two basic interpretations of 20. Okay. Or two mainstream ones. Okay. One is Lirdo. I'm just going to read from Rashi, even though a lot of people say this. Where's Rashi? Okay, so Rashi says, not here yet. Ben Esrim, Lirdov achar mizonosav. It's time to chase after your food, meaning your livelihood. Shish lo rechayim betavaro, because he has millstones on his neck. Okay, which is an expression to mean that he has responsibilities. V'holid banim b'shtei shanim. He had kids during those 2 years, from 18 to 20, right? Because he got married at 18. Ukvar shana b'talmudo. He's already learned Talmud. V'yasuk b'derech eretz, and now he's going to go get work. So you see from here, this is a good example of how if you got married at 18, so now you have millstones around your neck, and you already had kids, and so now it's time to go get make a livelihood to support your family. But if a person didn't get married at 18, so then maybe this would be later, or if they have parents who are supporting them, then maybe that would be later. Okay, fine. The next interpretation, which is a topic I've always wanted to take up. Yeah, Lauren?
This is a question on this idea because it
Sure.
just reminded me of this. Because sometimes people say, let's say, I'm thinking now, in seminary or people that are younger, because use this time, or yeshiva, use this time right now because when you get older, you're going to get a job and you're going to have less time for learning. But there's also opportunities for growth in those, older years, and you don't want to always be looking back and saying, "Oh, that was the best time." You know what I'm saying? Versus shouldn't there be? I guess you want to maximize your time when you're young, but also when you're older, you don't want that to be. That's valuable. Also, there could be growth.
So I actually that's one of the reasons I want to go here, because there's a Rביnu Yonah is going to make a point that I want to make that point through. Okay. So I just want to do one separate thing as well. This really should be its own topic, but I just wanted to mention it because I saw it here. So the other interpretation of 20 is I'm going to read it from someone else because they say it better. Yeah. So Ben Bacha, for example, says Ben Esrim Lirdov Klomar Shemaradfim Oso Min Hashemayim Lahanisho, is that you are they chase after you from heaven to punish you. Ki King Gzeres based in Shalmala Lahanish Es Adam Me Esrim Shana Ulamala, because the based in Shalmala, the heavenly court, punishes you from the age of 20 and up. So I don't know how many of you have heard of this notion that like, you're liable for heavenly punishments at the age of 20, but not until then. And anyone know where they get that from?
Is it because you could serve, like when they were getting people to like fight when they were in the
I don't think it is.
That's the only thing I can
But
think of that's
I
20.
don't think it is, although I wouldn't be surprised if someone relates it to that. So they get it from the Miraglim in the Midbar, that people under the age of 20 didn't die. And the Psukim seem to only say from under the age of 20, but Chazal say between the ages of 20 and 60. Now I don't know what this idea is, okay, but I did see this commentary that I just want to read because I feel like this is gonna be a thing that like you hear now and you're gonna be like, oh, I'm glad I heard that because it might answer some questions in the future about divine justice. So the Rabbi Ya'akov, Rabbi Shimshon says the same thing. So he says that's what I received as a tradition. V'livi mahases, my heart is uneasy with this. In the Midbar, there was no punishment over the age of 60. Okay, Shema Tomar Shein Manishin also. So maybe they'll say that you don't punish people over 60. Okay, so in other words, he's saying like this. He's saying if the source of this is the fact that that the people in the Midbar didn't get punished beneath the age of 60, and that's why we say that you're not subject to heavenly judgments. Well, from 60 and on, they also didn't get punished. So are you going to say that you're exempt from divine punishment from 60 and on? That's crazy. So then he says something which is just a data point, okay? And again, we're not going to the sugya because I don't know what this is talking about. He says, Yesh lefarish ledavar zeh shaveh pachos ben esrim v'yoser ben esrim. So he says, we can explain by saying that in this matter, then people under the age of 20 and people over the age of 60 are equal. Le'inyan onesh misa, that in regards to being punished with death. Shekashem she'ein misa habal adam bepachos mi ben esrim shana mishum onesh misa bidei shamayim bakares, just as death that comes to a person before the age of 20 is not a punishment on account of death at the hands of heaven or kares. Kach misa habal adam beyeser mi ben shishim ena mishum onesh misa bidei shamayim bakares. So too, death after the age of 60 is not a punishment from death at the hands of heaven or kares. Okay, so I think this is just a good data point to learn because, one of the big questions that people have on God's justice is when someone dies young, and I think there are always going to be people, whether they say it aloud or not, whether they wonder if this is like some sort of divine punishment, that this person died, at that age. So I think it's very interesting that he's saying if someone dies before 20, you can't say that that was a divine punishment. And likewise, if a 60, 70, 80, 90, 100-year-old person dies, you can't say, oh, God killed them because of a punishment, okay? Now, it might be a divine punishment, but I'm saying that, like, you should not take it as a rule that that's a divine punishment. I mean, he seems to be saying, he seems to be saying that you don't get punished from heaven under that age or over that age, okay? But I just think this is a data point because people say a lot of crazy things when it comes to, like, premature deaths, and, like, I think it's just good to have in your pocket. What else this means, I have no idea, okay? But I will quote, I always think that, Ayala, that this was what Rebbe said at Ezra's bar mitzvah, but then I know I've made this mistake, and I've thought that Rebbe has said many things at Ezra's bar mitzvah speech, or a speech at Ezra's bar mitzvah, so I really don't know, but Rabbi Chait gave a speech at someone's bar mitzvah, and said, this is, everyone's celebrating, but this is going to be a scary time, because, like, you have all this responsibility that you have to do the mitzvahs, but you should like remember the fact that even though Hashem holds you responsible for the mitzvahs, he doesn't hold you responsible for in terms of punishment until you're 20, and so that's like, there's like a training wheels period where you have to do the mitzvahs, but you're not going to be punished until you're 20. So I thought that was a good reminder for Bar Mitzvah Boy, but he's also seemingly in that statement saying that this is not just death. This is talking about like other punishments. So I have no idea how this works. Okay, but now the reason why I wanted to read this is Ribbeinu Yonah, okay? And this will address Lauren's point. Ribbeinu Yonah only says one thing in this entire Mishnah, I think, which says, Ben Esrim Lirdov, so age of 20 is to chase. Sheyirdof achar haTorah v'hamitzvah la'asos ulakayim. They should chase after the Torah and the mitzvah to do and to fulfill. And the footnote guy says, Nir midvarav shebegil yud gimel hu mischayev l'kayim es mitzvos. So it seems like from the age of 13, you're obligated to keep the mitzvos. About eno mechuyav lirdof acharehen ad gil esrim. But you're not obligated to chase after mitzvos until 20. V'tzarich bir hachiluk. And this difference needs to be explained. Okay, so what I got from this, I mean, I guess, do you have any theories as to what the difference is between being obligated in mitzvos and chasing mitzvos? Yeah, Vanessa?
Does it say it's chasing mitzvot or just chasing again? The way I understood it, and it's hard for me to follow along to here, so I'm going off my memory of your translation, is like when you're 13, you don't have agency. You have agency over yourself, but you can't like pursue and go out from yourself. Like you can do like, you can put on tefillin, whatever, like you can do your own mitzvah, but like when you're 20, you have the ability to like go out in the world and actually affect change in the world and do mitzvah that like.
So that's one direction you could take, is it's talking about like being proactive in going out because you have more agency at the age of 20 than you do at the age of 13. I think that's a fine interpretation. So I was thinking more along the lines of Lauren, which is that, you know, what is this person doing according to the Mishnah and Pirkei Avos until the age of 20? Like, what's the main occupation?
Learning,
right? Okay. I mean, yeah, he gets married at 18, but it seems like he's learning. Okay. So I do think there is, you know, when I was in yeshiva, then, yeshiva was still a post-high school yeshiva. So most of the guys were starting in yeshiva at like 18 and 19. Nowadays, it's slightly different that the guys are coming back at like 20 and 21. But, you know, but guys were in full-time yeshiva at 18 and 19. And like sometimes there would be opportunities to do things like chesed, or like to be involved in like other stuff. And our Rבינו would tell us there will always be time for chesed later, but this is the only time you have in your life to be exclusively devoted to learning. And you should take advantage of that while you have it. And, you know, and then like, you know, you'll do other stuff later. Now, I'm not saying that that's exactly what Rבינו Yonah is saying, but he is saying like, when you're 19, you should be learning. You shouldn't be going out and pursuing bikur cholim and like, you know, like haknasas orchem and stuff like that. You know, you're not pursuing it. Doing it, yeah. If the occasion should arise to do it, you do it. But pursuing is a different thing. But at the age of 20, then you should go pursue mitzvos. You know, so I do think, Lauren, that there is a reality to like prioritizing the learning at the early part of your life while that's the designation, and also while you don't have any other responsibilities and while your mind is still developing, you know. And like, is it true that you could get personal development in other ways from other things? Yeah, but there is a certain like critical time period where like you're putting in the time to learn, and you're going to lose that. And like, also what you gain from there is going to affect everything else that you do. And like, in other words, learning 2 years full time between high school and college is going to affect all the other mitzvos you do. Okay, doing bikur cholim and nichum avelim at the age of between 18 and 20 will perfect you. It'll help you, but it won't affect your learning for the rest of everything. You know, Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam. Talmud Torah has this ability to like affect everything that you do, and I think that's why there's like merit to that argument of like focusing until learning until at least until 20, according to this, if not longer.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think maybe I was just thinking about looking how you look at the rest of your life after you're done with that period. Like,
yeah,
it's not that this period is the
downhill.
best period and it's not downhill from there. It's like that's the foundation stone, and then there's still more to look forward to. Because I think sometimes some people, you know, look back like, oh, that was the best time, and then they're just depressed about the rest of their life. You
That's
know,
true.
But I think the learning sometimes when you are involved in things, the learning becomes greater, or the learning becomes more richer, or more nuanced, and But
I
you definitely need the 20-year-old stage.
Yeah. Okay, good. I agree. Okay. All right. So now let's look at 40. Okay. So the Meiri. Okay. So the Meiri is gonna explain 30, 40, and 50. And I'm gonna tell you right away, the problem is everyone quotes this problematic Gemara about 40. Okay. the Meiri is one of the only ones who gives his own interpretation of 40 first, and then he quotes the Gemara. Okay, so first let's start with 30. Ben shloshim lekoach. And this is not my translation. I tweaked a few things, but this is the English translation. Klomar, sha'az nismale kocho buhu b'takli zakol. Then he attains full strength and is at the apex of power. Yisbonin shelo yotziena rak la'avodas Hashem yisale. He should therefore take heed to expend that strength only for the service of Hashem. K'moshen emar, as it says, b'levim, shelo hayu ksherim la'avodas masa elami ben shloshim v'mala. It says about the Levim that they were only considered fit for the service of carrying from the age of 30 and up. Okay, so here we're talking physical strength. And he's saying basically like at 30, you attain peak physical strength. Okay. And I don't know exactly what he's including. I don't know if he just means muscles or if he means like health, stamina, youthful energy or whatever. And he's saying you should only expend it for the service of Hashem. Okay. I guess let's just stop and analyze that for a second here. So what is the what's the Havamina, I guess? You know, or what's the alternative? Yeah, Vanessa?
Maybe this is addressing people who are like, oh, I'm 30, I've got 70 more years, I'm young. Like, no, this is the apex of your power. This is actually like,
right.
Use it while you've got it.
Yeah. So in the Sforno's vein, then yes, look at this as a closing window, right? That, okay, you're 30-year-old, okay, that's like that's the peak, and that's when things turn. Okay, we'll see them dip later, but this is when they start to turn. Yeah. So yeah, Ayala.
Also similar maybe, but a little different is like maybe someone can say that like now when I'm 30, I have strength. I'll like direct it towards like, I don't know, some like random career things or whatever they want to achieve. And then like once I'm a little older, I'll like spend time learning and serving Hashem. And this is like, no.
Okay, right. I think that's more of the thrust of the Meiri, that he has to tell you to devote this to avodas Hashem because you might devote it elsewhere. You know, that if it is, again, I don't know what the very, look, different people have different things at different ages, at different eras in society. So let's say you might have an era where like, when you're 30, like that's when you focus on your physical appearance, and like you just use it for like some sort of like narcissistic indulgence, or people use it for like, I'm sure there are a lot of men who like, like try to, who are like in workout culture and just try to like attain like muscles, and that's like, okay, that's good for physical health, but like, what are you using it for? Like the question is, what are you using this as means for, and not making this as an end in and of itself. I was going to say also, yeah, Vanessa, I don't remember what I was going to say.
I guess my question on that, while you find what you're looking for, is like, shouldn't all of these steps be for avodat Hashem? Like
Yeah,
the marriage
I think that's
also,
how the Meiri takes it. Yeah, but I think he's saying here,
he's just using it as an example.
Yeah, and I think that it's more obvious by the learning how that's part of your avodas Hashem and the mitzvos, and then the getting married as well. I don't know how he takes the 20-year-old thing, but here it's like not obvious that strength does not directly like make you think, oh yeah, of course, avodas Hashem. Okay, now 40. Arba'im ben arba'im labina klomar sha'az hu b'tachlis his bonus. I couldn't really translate his bonus. I translate as contemplativeness, and you'll see why. K'omram zal. But notice he does change it from bina to his bonus. Bina means understanding, which is like the perfection or the faculty. His bonus seems to be like an activity. And in the example he quotes supports this. K'omram zal ben arba'im shana hikir Avraham es boro. That Abraham was 40 years old when he recognized his creator. And the Rambam says this as well. And I think actually I want to read from the Rambam because the Rambam puts this in better context. He says about Avraham in Hilchos Avodah Zarah, chapter 1, halacha 3. Yeah. So he talks about Avraham, Ad shenolad amudo sha'olam shu Avraham Avinu, until the pillar of the world, Avraham Avinu, was born. Kemen shenigmal eitan zeh. Once this strong one was weaned, so we're talking like a kid, hischil l'shotet badato v'hukatan. He started to explore with his mind while he was still young. Ulachashe b'yom u'v'layla. He would think day and night. V'hayatama, and he would like wonder. How is it possible for this sphere, the celestial sphere, to be operating constantly without an operator? Who rotates it? It's impossible for it to rotate itself. He didn't have any teacher or anyone who informed him of this. He was steeped in urkastim among the foolish Ovdei Avodah Zarah. All of his parents and the entire nation served Avodah Zarah. And he worshipped with them. But his mind probed and understood until he apprehended the way of truth and the line of righteousness with his good mind. He knew that there was one God, and he's the one who operates the sphere. He created everything. There's no God in existence other than him. He knew that the entire people was made errors. And the thing that caused them to err was that they worshipped the stars and the images until the truth was gone from their mind. And Avram was 40 years old when he recognized his creator. So you see, it wasn't just like 40, bam. He started when he was a kid and was progressing, and he reached like intellectual maturity when he was 40, you know? So I think that's like the same thrust as the Meiri, even though he doesn't use the exact same words. Okay. So that makes sense. Okay. And I don't know, like if there's any like cognitive studies that support this, you know, like I know that they're always like looking at when various parts of the brain mature. I don't know if it's possible to do studies on this because we're talking about someone who's like living a life of learning, you know, so I don't really know. But there's a certain like intuitive sense that if you're like learning, you know, and spending all your life learning, you know, starting from age 15 intensively, you know, there's gonna be a certain like attainment at the age of 40. Okay, or you know, no, at a certain age. Okay, this is just saying 40. Okay, now here's the difficulty. Or actually, any thoughts on this before we go to the difficulty? Okay, I mean, obviously we're gonna have more thoughts on this later. Here's the big difficulty. I think everyone quotes this Gemara, okay? And you'll tell me what the difficulty is, okay? So he says, so he quotes the sages in Tractate Avodah Zarah, who said, I'm actually gonna read this from the Gemara itself, okay? So I'm gonna segue into this a little bit. The Gemara, I'm reading the Steinsaltz translation. The Gemara returns to the verse cited above. The sages taught with regard to the verse, Mi yitain v'haya levavam zeh lahem. Who would give? It's a strange expression. Like, who would give that they had such a heart as this? It's kind of an expression of like, if only someone would grant them a heart such as this, always to fear me, God, and to keep all my commandments, that it might be good for them with their children forever. Okay, so that was in the beginning of Sefer Devarim. Okay, then it says, at a later stage, Moshe said to the Jewish people, ingrates, you who are ungrateful, children of ingrates. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to the Jewish people, who would give that they had such a heart as this always, they should have said, you should give us a heart to fear you. The Gemara explains, okay, we don't really need to go into the details here. The Gemara explains that Moshe called the Jewish people ingrates, as it is written that the Jewish people spoke disparagingly of the man, and our soul loathes this light bread, despite the fact that it was the highest quality food. Moshe further called them children of ingrates, as it is written that after sinning and eating from the tree of knowledge, Adam said, the woman who you gave to be with me, she gave me of the tree and I did eat. Adam complained that the woman had been given to him in order to cause him to sin, whereas in fact she had been given to him to serve as a helpmate. Okay, here comes the relevant part. Yet even Moshe, our teacher, who said this to the Jewish people, did not allude to the Jewish people until after 40 years that they should have stated this request. As it is stated, and I have led you 40 years in the wilderness, which shows that Moshe was speaking 40 years after the revelation at Sinai. And at this point it is written, but the Lord has not given you a heart to know and eyes to see and ears to hear until this day. Okay. Rabbah said, conclude from here that a person does not understand the opinion of his teacher until after 40 years, as Moses said this to the Jewish people only after 40 years of learning Torah. Okay. So I'm going to read the Rבינו Yonah. Rבינו Yonah says it in a much more concise way. So he quotes that pasuk and says, Yeah, I don't know why I said Rבינו only talks about the previous clause. He says, Kamosha Amar Moshe Alav Shalom Yisrael, like Moshe said to Yisrael, V'lo nasan Hashem lachem leiv ladas ve'inayim liros v'oznaim lishmo ad hayom hazeh. Hashem did not give you a heart to know, eyes to see, ears to hear until this day, and that's in Devarim chapter 29, which is at the end of the 40 years. So Rבינו says, V'chi ad hayom hahu lo yadu haTorah mitzvos. Really, God, they didn't know the Torah until today, until 40 years later. Ella Ratzalomar, rather this means Shlo Yardu. Where did he go? Shlo Yardu L'sof Hadas Ad Hayom Hahu. They didn't reach the depths of the knowledge of Torah until that day. Shnemar says Sofar Arba'im Shana. Mikan, and from here, Latami She'eno Yor L'sof Das Rabo Ad Arba'im Shana. You learn that a Talmid does not reach the depths of his Rebbe's mind until 40 years. Okay. So did you spot the problem? Yeah, Tamar?
Well, it doesn't sound like it's talking about age.
Exactly. Okay, right. So it's saying that the Jewish people didn't understand Moshe until 40 years, but it's 40 years of learning with him. Okay. And so, yeah, it makes sense that they don't grasp the mind of their Rebbe until 40 years. And Rבינו Bachia, which I'm not going to read, goes further and he says, and even Moshe didn't grasp God's mind, so to speak. You know, he didn't get like the full understanding of Torah until he learned Torah for 40 years. But that's not being 40 years old. Okay, that's 40 years of study. So the problem is everyone, all the Mefarshim quote this for Ben Arbaim Labina. And I don't know what to make of that. Like, it's not about being 40. It's about studying for 40 years. Yeah, Vanessa?
I wonder if this Mishnah came in a world where we already have Torah. So these people needed the full 40 years to learn Torah, and it's really that this isn't just about like physical ages in the life process like I saw it, and it's more just about like where you are in the Torah process. And that probably also answers why we start with like by like the Mikra, which is like you can't actually, no one's reading this at 5. No one's reading this Pirkei Avos and like I'm reading this as a 25-year-old and like thinking of the 20 and 30. You're reading this as a becoming 40-year-old. A 5-year-old isn't reading this, so why was that included? Like, why didn't it start at 18 or 20? Right. It started to show you that like this is about Torah and to keep that on track, which is also what we learned with the Meiri on the 30. So maybe this is showing us that like it's that by after 40 years of all this learning, this is what you're about to expect. And I don't think that you can completely detach it from the physical, because we are also physical. And I think the Sforno had a point. And I'm just really attached to it. I can't understand this without some part of that component, especially the latter part. I don't know. That's what I'm.
So I think that's a good answer. I don't even know if I'm tweaking one thing, but it's because I was gonna, when you first started giving your answer, I was gonna say, well, even in our Mishnah, you really have only learned for 35 years at this point, right? Because you start at 5. But then I think you also said though that this is really talking about 40 years. See, we are born into Torah. Well, most of us, not me, but we were born into Torah, and so it's the immersion in Torah. I mean, even before that kid starts learning Chumash, he's steeped in Torah values, and he hears Torah stuff like in the womb, like that's so whereas they did not have Torah at that time. So actually, that is the answer that I found, but it didn't click until you just said it now. Who says this? Rבינו Bachia says, so he quotes a similar thing. He says, Ben Arbaim Huzman Shesichlo Shel Adam Shalim V'dato Umedes Al Maleas. So he says, 40 is a time when a person's intellect is Shalim here does not mean perfected, because obviously you don't perfect your intellect, fully developed. And his mind stands on its level. Shekavar Avar. No, this is a funny thing. This is a side point. I wrote about this as a Facebook status when I turned 36. He says Shekavar Avar Rov Zmano Shu Shloshim Vishesh. You've already passed the midway point in your life at 36. Okay, and he's saying midway point because that pasuk in Tehillim we read says that 70 is like the average age. So once you're at 36, then you're like, past the midpoint of the average age. Ubinyano maschil leharis, and the building is starting to crumble. Okay, the building is starting to deteriorate. V'koach habasar holach medaldo, and the strength of the flesh is beginning to dwindle. The kaven, okay, that's the bad news. The good news is kaven shekoach habasar medaldo. Once the flesh is starting to dwindle, koach hasechel mischazik umizdakech. Your faculty of your mind is strengthening and being more purified. Okay, but then so he quotes the whole Gemara about a person doesn't reach his Rav's understanding until 40. Okay. Then he says like this. Shnemar, and he quotes the pasuk, Buhu haya betashlim arba'im shana shel midbar. That was at the end of the 40 years in the midbar. Then he says what Vanessa said. Shar Yisrael mishi kiblu haTorah b'Sinai hu ki yelod hazeh. When the Jews received the Torah at Sinai, they were like this child. Lo pasku mililmod. They did not cease learning. V'lo amdu al das rabban. Humoshe ad arba'im shana. Okay, and then the Tosfos Yom Tov says it also. He says, he asks our question. He says, he quotes the Gemara and he says, "V'kashya dezo ina raya mi anshe midbar shekashayu arba'im shana b'midbar achar matan Torah hayu yoser mi b'nei arba'im shana harbe." So he says, you can't bring a proof from the people in the midbar because by that time they were already much older than 40. Okay, so first of all, he gives another answer. He says, you can infer it from the fact that Moshe was talking to all of them. The ones who were kids at the time of Matan Torah are included. God did not give all of you a heart to know. Okay, so he's basically saying like Moshe was addressing all of them, and now he's saying by now all of you have been learning Torah for 40 years. You know, this is at the end of the 40 years. Okay, fine. But then he says a much more simpler thing. V'od nira lomar di Yisrael b'shas matan Torah gerim hayu, that Israel at the time of Matan Torah were converts. Daha minayhu yalfinan shetzarich ger tefila k'mo shekasav b'sof perak. So that's where we learn the conversion of ger is from. Ger kikatan shenola dami, and ger is like a newborn child. So I don't think you need to go into halachos here. I think you could just say, like Vanessa said, these Jews at the time of Matan Torah were getting Torah from scratch. They were not raised in a Torah environment, but we are. So our informal education begins from birth, you know, and that's why this is relevant. Okay, that's a good answer. Okay, so now the question is, yeah, Vanessa?
It's okay if we don't answer this, but I have a follow-up question. Then what does like the modern ger do with this? Do they understand it more from a Sforno perspective? Is it just like, okay,
Yeah,
we're
so
in more modern times? Like there's
no, so the modern ger is got a later start, you know?
So like a person who achieved gerut at 20 should be reading this as like they should read 40 when they're 60.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's gonna be like a 1-to-1 ratio because you also, you know, if you start learning later, then you also like can pick it up faster or whatever, you know?
Right.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Yeah, so now the question is, does this change? So now the Meiri did quote both of them, okay? So are these two ideas or is this like unified here? Like, because when this first part makes it sound like there's a natural development of understanding that occurs at 40, and he quotes Abraham, and Abraham didn't even have Torah, right? And then now he's quoting the fact that the Jews learned Torah for 40 years, and then he's associating that to our milestone here. So is there a way we could just like harmonize these two ideas? I feel like it's very close already, you know? Yeah, Vanessa.
I don't have a good synthesis, but I think all of this is multifaceted. Like they're not direct age transactions, they also are. This is prescriptive, but it's also descriptive. So like the same way Abraham had a more general, like he used the seichel, like he really just like thought and looked at the world around him and came to an understanding of God, even without a thing of Torah. Whereas like, I think the same way, like I'm thinking about the 21 a lot. Like we can think of this as like going out to the world and doing work, and we can also think of it more as like what the Meiri said of like avodat Hashem.
Yeah.
Like I think it's just multifaceted, and like both approaches are valid because they're both being brought up by the same commentators, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I like how you're contextualizing it within the rest of what we learned here. Yeah.
It sounds like the Avraham piece is more like the general secher, and the Moshe piece is more the like Torah, like
Right.
Torah part.
Okay, yeah. I think you could learn it that way. I'm gonna give another theory as well. Again, yeah, Ayala, what do you want to say?
Can you say that it's like any area that you're involved in, like by the time that you've been involved in it for 40 years, you've like turned and like processed it enough and you'll like gain a new like understanding of it. So like Avram had that for like studying the universe. And
Okay.
then a Talmud from a Rav had like specifically like whatever Rav you're learning from once you have learned from them for 40 years. And same with Torah.
Okay, yeah, I think that's a great answer as well. I'll throw mine on the pile here, which is that maybe it's talking about nature and nurture, that there is a certain natural development of the mind, just like there's a natural development of the body. And he's quoting Abraham because even though Abraham was working on this, there was a certain amount that he couldn't get until he was like 40, you know? And so like there's gonna be a natural you know, trajectory of your intellectual development, but we also have the nurture of like being born into Torah and then learning from our parents and our Rebbeim, and like that also is there's also like a boost that we get from that as well. Okay, then let's do the last part, 50. Okay, ben chamishim la'etza klomar she'atzaso ru'uya, meaning that his counsel will be appropriate. Okay, ki ha'etza amnam tzricha shnei dvarim. Advice requires two things. Echad mitzad seichel adam. First is intellectual. The second is experience. You've seen lots of things that have happened. Like the Chachmei Musar say, Hayamim. I actually need to leave this. Yorucha. Hayamim Yorucha. The days will instruct you chachmos in wisdom. You've seen a lot of stuff by the time you're 50. And you're still with the force of your intellect. Klomar, meaning shelo nata adayin sichlo la'arov. Your intellect has not started to sunset, to twilight. V'nimtzeis atzaso mizukekes mitzad shtei hadvarim hatzrichim la. Therefore, your counsel, your advice is distilled through these two things. This is also why I wanted to learn that 40 is a natural development of the intellect, because in 30 he talks about the natural strength. 40 is ambiguous the way he talks about it, and then 50 he's saying that you've got you're still at the peak intellectual might, you know. Similarly, Rבינו Bachia says for 50, Kishu ben chamishim v'habasar tashash, when you're 50 and your flesh starts to weaken, v'efshar lo litruach b'malachos kavatchila, and it's impossible for you to do the same physical work like you used to do. V'sichlo mizdakech liros es hanolad. Your mind can see the consequences. Ezu chacham meroz hanolad, who's wise when he sees the consequences. V'az yitachen lo laseis etza nechona. Then you can give proper advice. So it is interesting because it sounds like he's saying it does require a certain distance from life that starts happening when you start not being able to participate in work in the same way, and your mind is being sharpened. Then you can see the future. Matzino b'Levim, we find by the Levim, I think this is an interesting thing. So he quotes the same pasuk that was quoted earlier, that when the Levi of the Sforno quoted, when the Levi is 50, he retires from the legion of Avoda and he doesn't serve more. But then he says, and he will minister to his brothers. And the Meiri says, "V'sherus zeh he etza shenosen lahem." What is this ministering? It's giving them advice, you know. So again, I don't think it's necessarily one thing, but he is saying that like your intellect is going to keep going, your physicality is going to start going down, and you have accumulated certain life experiences that allow you to give advice. Now, you could say, well, why can't the 40-year-old give advice? You know, like, are you really getting that many more life experiences between 40 and 50? So you could say yes, but I think there's another answer you can give. Yeah, Vanessa?
I'm thinking of like the doctor hierarchy. I work in a hospital, so I over medicalize everything. But like, if you think of like,
so does America. No, yeah.
If you think of like I'm thinking of like our team. The top of our tier is like this old man, like Dr. Fisher, and like on paper he does not physically do much. He's not a nurse. He's not like putting in the he just tells people what to do, and you're like, okay, like these guys are telling us what to do. Why? But it's because he's done all that grunt work already. Like when you're 20 and you have strength, you're doing the more bare bones physical stuff. Yeah. Then as you get older, you start managing and teaching the young people how to do the physical stuff. Then when you get older, you start managing all the people and like You know what? Am I making sense? Like the
Yeah,
more
you are.
wisdom
Yeah,
you
yeah,
get, the more you're able to like oversee, and the more you're able to like step back. And you have to step back because you are like physically like getting weaker, and it's like, man, it's been 20 years since my residency. I actually don't remember how to place an
Yeah.
NG2 anymore. Or like whatever it is. Like
right. Yeah.
so
Okay. Good. Yeah. I think that is a good example. Yeah, a good example where of exactly what the Rebbe Bach is saying. Yeah, I have another idea, which is what happens between 40 and 50. So that allows you to give advice. So it's not just the 10 additional years of experience. It's since when you reach 40, then you have a certain maturity of understanding. It's living life with that understanding that changes the color of your experience. It's different experience like that you have when you're doing it at 40 than it is before. And I guess I can't testify to this now because I'm not 40 yet, but I'll tell you, I started teaching when I was 25, or at least teaching in high school when I was 25. And like, did I learn about teaching? Yes, but my mind was still developing and my knowledge was still developing and my knowledge of teaching was still developing. I have a feeling that God willing, these next 10 years that I'm teaching, if I have this like Bina at 40, again, it's not like a magical thing where you get the Bina at 40, but like to the extent that I have it, my experiences teaching are going to it's going to infuse the life experience I get with a different power that will make it like, actionable for advice, like it's going to affect me in a different way. So that's what I think happens in the years. And obviously you're also, now that you have Bina at 40, what Abraham accomplished after 40, I'm sure was very good because he attained that understanding at 40. So like your mind is still going strong and getting stronger, and you're getting these experiences. So it really is like Meiri said, it's like both the things that you get improvement on, the understanding and the life experience. Yeah. Okay, so let's just summarize what we have here for tonight. So what we said was that Sforno holds that the main message here is within the general memento mori recognition that you're going to die and you have limited time. There's also a more micro-focused realization that life is a series of sequential windows that open and close, windows of opportunity, and you need to take advantage of the opportunities while you have them, because they're not going to be around forever. And so that's the general thrust. And therefore, you should have some roadmap of what is good to focus on. Now, it is not exactly this. This is what worked for Chazal. Ours might be different. Excuse me. Your life circumstances might be different. But the point is that you should have some roadmap, so you could recognize when these opportunities present themselves and when they start to close, and not like fake yourself out. Or so there's two things. We're saying the roadmap serves two purposes. One is to not miss the opportunity, and but the other is to not misuse the opportunity for some other endeavor. And having a Torah roadmap helps you to frame things in a Torah setting. Like I can guarantee you that some secular person who is about to approach their 40th birthday is not talking about how they're going to be using their Bina, and like they're doing like whatever those 40-year-olds do, so like the very fact that we have this roadmap that we use to discuss our aging is a benefit for like reinforcing these values and helping us to like stay on track. And then we had ideas about 20. We really did 20, 30, 40, and 50. So 20 we said is with three ideas. One is chasing after your livelihood because you've got the millstones around your neck. You put in the time of the learning, and you had the 2 years where you're having kids and also like finishing up the learning, and then now you got to go provide for a family, but then you had the idea also of heaven chases you to punish you, which is just a data point that like deaths before 20 are not divine punishment. Then we had Rabbi Yona's idea of you were doing mitzvos before at 13, but now you're chasing mitzvos, which we said that there is a certain focus, is don't invest all your energy in like branching out for opportunities of mitzvos while you're still primarily devoted to learning. Then we had shloshim, which is physical capacity, your top physical shape. Make use of that while you have it, and make use of it for avodas Hashem. Okay, and I'd say, by the way, if we're going to put this in the learning context, I mean, like, I don't know, like I was able to stay up later at night in my early 30s, you know, like not so much anymore, you know, so like you know, pulling a mishmar, people can still go like, you know, in the 30s, but not necessarily the case. So like, you know, that affects your learning as well. Then at 40, we said there's a natural maturing of the intellect of Bina, and there's also a certain, you reach that level of immersion in Torah from that age, and that's going to affect you in terms of nurture. And same thing with your Rebbe, you know, there's all these different applications. But the point is that there is a certain, like, your mind reaches its maturity where now the instrument is fully functional, you know, and you're going to continue to build it, but it's like fully functional at that point, and you could really start going now. That continues to build till 50, and at 50, by 50, you've had more life experience, and you're also starting to get distant from life because you are your body's starting to dwindle. And oh, by the way, I think he supports this, I think, in his 60 also. I'm just remembering now. In 60, the Meiri says, oh, hold on. Where's the Meiri? 60, the inyane ha'olam borchim mimenu. Worldly things flee from you. That's when you should be striving in your service of God and remembering your end. Okay, remembering that you're going to die. And then 70, now you're not even fit for the matters of the world. So it all goes back into serving Hashem, you know. Yeah, so that's at 50, and we said that, yeah, that's it. So yeah, and I think that what we've concluded about these periods is it's not hard stop binary. It's a continuum, you know. And yeah, so at each age, like, you know, those of you who are like, you know, about to turn 25, or like people in their mid 30s, but you know, or approaching 30, like I think it's good when you're reaching these milestones to like look at this mishnah and like remind yourself where you are. And I have a feeling that, I mean, I can testify actually, the way you see the mishnah will change at different ages, you know. And it's nice that we have this this roadmap here. Okay, so Bli Neder, next week we can go back to our mishnah in Ezehu Gibor, and yeah, the only thing I would jeopardize next week is I am planning to fly to Seattle on Thursday morning. I should get in well before shiur time, but in case there's some flight delay, that would be the only reason that is you know, that I see as a potential thing. But yeah, okay, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you,
Thank you.
and happy
Happy
birthday in
Have a
advance.
good
Thank
night.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Birthday.
Shabbat shalom.
Bye.